Most bankers aren't ready to help you until after their third cup of coffee. But with Central National Bank's after-hours service, you don't have to wait for the bank lobby to open to get help. You can contact us from 6 to 8:30 in the morning or from 5 to 10 in the evening, and we'll connect you to a real, live, local person who can answer questions and fix problems 7 days a week. Bank different. Bank Central. Central National Bank. Member FDIC.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
I tried to fight all through the night, deep in the heart of Texas. The trailer park is nice and dark, deep in the heart of Texas. That drinks his brew and he spits his chew, deep in the heart of Texas. The TV blares, but no one cares, deep in the heart of Texas. Here we go!
Hey, everybody. Welcome to
Boah.
King of the Hill podcast. I'm Mike.
And I'm Rusty.
Rusty, it is a That Ain't Right Friday.
That
Welcome
ain't right,
to it.
Man. That ain't right.
So, on these Fridays, they're a little more freewheeling.
Yeah, freewheeling,
Free
wheeling,
balling.
dealing,
Yeah. Free falling.
limousine riding, kiss stealing, wheeling, dealing. Woo! I got an actual funny story about Ric Flair. It was Ric Flair. I actually got a funny story about it real quick.
Yeah.
So I watched this Kill Tony comedy podcast.
Yeah.
Well, they had Ric Flair as one of their guests
Really?
because Tony Hinchcliffe is a huge wrestling fan.
Okay.
Which is anybody that knows Tony Hinchcliffe knows he's this massive WWE fan.
Yeah.
So he had him on his show, but they had to hard edit it. They had to edit it so much.
Really?
Because he was just, they said that some of the audience members leaked on Reddit what happened, and apparently he was just obscene,
Oh, I bet.
all kinds of racist
Yeah.
Asian women jokes.
Oh, I
just
don't doubt it.
completely
Yeah.
racist. He was verbally accosting one of the front audience
Wonderful.
members.
Wonderful.
So they just kind of have it chopped up and cut
Yeah.
up. But
Yeah.
before the show even ends, he said, I'm not here to make fun of people who donate their time. He just went on this weird drunk rant
weird.
about how he doesn't want to
Yeah.
make fun of these
Yeah.
amateur comedians, which is the whole premise of
Think
the
about
show.
how many times he's been hit in the head, though, too. You know?
Yeah, well, think of how many beers he
Yeah,
drank before he got
sure,
on stage.
sure.
They said he had about 7 or 8 beers before he even got on the stage, and he was drinking while he was on stage too.
Yikes.
And them little beers, them 12-ounce cans, they don't look like nothing in those big wrestlers'
Sure,
hands, and they're just
sure.
slugging them like they're
Yeah,
water. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were talking about some of the other shows before we started this. Pete Sousa, he had the agent that handles Ric Flair and
Oh, wow. I gotta
Magic
check that one
Johnson and
out.
a couple other things.
I'm gonna have to
Yeah.
check that episode out. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds really good actually.
All right. So a lot of the time, what we'll do on Fridays is we'll take an article that we found online or in a paper or something, which papers don't exist.
Yeah,
And kind of talk about it. Now,
in
this
the paper.
in the paper.
Yeah, standing on the news.
This one comes from HoustonPublicMedia.org. The article is called "Are We Still Living in the Texas Depicted in King of the Hill?" It says, ahead of the planned reboot on Hulu, we contemplate the animated series' influence on how others perceive Texas. Now, this is written by Garrett Bowman, and I believe he's the one that recorded this. There's a little 5-minute thing here I want you to listen to. A guy named Sean O'Neill, who was a writer at large for Texas Monthly, wrote about King of the Hill and its influence on how other people see Texas and things. So let's listen to this, and then we'll come back behind it and give our take on it.
Alrighty.
You listen to me, mister. I work for a living. And I mean real work, not writing down gobbledygook. I provide the people of this community with propane and propane accessories.
What kind of Texas jukebox is that, for crying out loud? It doesn't even have the theme from Dallas.
I've been calling y'all people better than a month now, grab about y'all every time that dang old dog cross the start yapping at y'all 24 hours a day, and nobody answered you.
Just a few short clips there from the popular animated series King of the Hill. It ran for 13 seasons and endeared audiences with its humor, characters, and depiction of small-town Texas life. There is a revival of the series on the way on Hulu. Seems a good time to contemplate how perceptions of Texas and Texans have been influenced by it and maybe changed in the years since it was on the air. Sean O'Neill's written about King of the Hill's influence on how others see Texas. He's a writer at large for Texas Monthly and joins us now. Sean, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Let's start here. How did King of the Hill properly reflect Texas?
Well, I certainly think it captures some of our, let's say, idiosyncrasies, our quirks, some of our obsessions, football, barbecue, or lawn care, our love of hunting and guns and rodeos, that sort of thing. Definitely a little bit of our nativist pride. I'm thinking of the episode where Hank discovers that he's actually born in New York and he has to go through this elaborate hazing ritual to earn the right to be Texan. So I think that sort of speaks to it.
Yeah.
A certain street trickiness.
How far did it delve from a characterization of Texans into caricature of Texans? And is it unavoidable when you're doing an animated comedy that there's going to be a certain degree of that?
Well, that's actually a really good division between representing and becoming a caricature.
Yeah.
Because a caricature should be way over the top.
And that's what the guy that was coming to do the fuel deal was from New England. He came down and he was this caricature. He wasn't that's not what Texas
He was looking for a caricature.
Yeah, he was looking for a caricature, because even like Texan, as I think of Texan, it's not necessarily a cowboy hat wearing, boot wearing person. It's not somebody that wrangles cows and stuff like that. There's an urban element to being a Texan as well.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a miss to a lot of people that don't live in Texas.
Yeah.
There is this urban cowboy, if you will, where they don't ride horses and they don't do all this stuff, but they still attach to this Texan element.
That just seems like a throwback to me, and part of our heritage, being in Texas, we acknowledge the cowboy hats and the boots and the steers and all that stuff, but basically around here, unless the fair's in town, which it is right now, that's about the only time you think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
honestly.
you're not just constantly thinking about rodeos and cattle and all that stuff, unless you're living in the areas where that matters.
I've been on a horse like twice in my life. So,
I've been on a horse more than twice, but it's just that Texan thing where people just assume that you're Texan, but there's a bigger mentality to being Texan than it has to do with cows and horses and cowboy hats.
Absolutely.
It's everybody thinks it's a lot of individuality, but it's really not. In Texas, I think that there is a certain element of individuality, but again, it's all community driven. Everything is about community, even though it might be isolated, insular communities, but it's still, that's what you got. Your baseball people, you got your soccer people, you got, I'm sure that's everywhere in the United States like that, but in Texas, sports is just huge. And even soccer right now in Texas is just massive. Like with everything that Andrew G does with his stuff and all the soccer things that he supports, that particular the particular people that he supports, the SoCo people. I actually went to school with the guy's wife that does that, and they're phenomenal people, what they do for stuff like that. And we've got baseball. It's just this community feel that I've been all over the United States. I've been to almost pretty much almost every state. There's a few states I haven't been to, but I've been to almost every state, at least every populous state. And you just don't feel that. You just don't see, like, there's the door holding that we do. We hold doors open for people here. There's just certain type of understanding.
You should never take that as a slight on anybody. If somebody holds a door for you here in Texas, it's because that's the way we were brought up. It has nothing to do with you.
And you could tell the people that aren't from Texas because they get weird about it. You're like, you must not be from Texas. I was like, this is what we do in Texas. I hold the door open for you. I don't care if it's for
man, woman, child. I hold the door open.
A 5-year-old or an 80-year-old. I'm going to hold the door open for you if I'm in front of you.
It's just part of our thing.
Yeah.
All right, let's listen to the rest of this.
It's a cartoon, right? But I've always said that ironically, King of the Hill was a lot more three-dimensional than a lot of the other depictions of Texans prior to it. Prior to King of the Hill, you had a lot of cowboys and oil tycoons in Dallas. You had Walker, Texas Ranger. These, in my opinion, are a lot broader caricatures than you can.
I don't think of Walker, Texas Ranger as Texas.
I don't really think of Walker, Texas Ranger as...
I don't think of Walker, Texas Ranger ever. I just don't think about it.
I don't think... Well, actually... I probably think about it twice a week at least. Walker Texas Ranger.
What
at
the
least
hell?
twice a week.
Why?
Well, because it was a show I watched a ton of as a kid. It was just a show that I watched a lot of, kind of thing. So sometimes whenever I see like a law enforcement truck, anytime I see a pic, because when I was a kid, all they had was Crown Vics. They didn't really have you had one cop that had a truck, and that was like maybe the head of the police or whatever.
It was a big deal, yeah.
So whenever you see like, there's so many trucks on the road nowadays that have police, badges and stuff on them. It'll be like a brand new Dodge, and it'll be badged with, whatever police department. And it just reminds me, anytime I see a pickup truck, I just think that you're going to get Walker and Tremaine jump out of the truck ready to just start kicking people.
The only time I ever think about it is when I drive by a billboard and it's got Chuck Norris's face with a cowboy hat on it, and he's selling his kick you in the gut water or whatever.
You want to really know what that show did for young boys?
What's that?
It really thought that we could implement kicks when we were fighting people.
Sure.
So there's a lot of kids that got their ass whooped because they would kick and then fall over, and the other kid would jump on top of them because they were trying to do these weird backspin kicks.
So many kids' asses kicked,
King of the Hill. And certainly some of Hank's friends, Dale Gribble is an obvious caricature of this sort of off the deep end libertarian sort of Texan. And I think what the show really did really wisely was contrast Hank against characters like that, and especially against his dad, who was this very big, broad, flamboyant sort of Texan that I think most people would have expected if you said they were doing a cartoon about Texans. It would be the Cotton character. And
I don't ever really think of Cotton as Texas either.
I don't either.
When I see him.
I don't think.
Boy, there's an old Texas guy.
I don't either. He doesn't seem like a Texan to me at all. The only thing that's remotely maybe Texan would be the Cadillac car.
Sure.
But I've not met any World War II veterans, because I've met a lot. Being of the age range where most of the World War II veterans when I was a kid were in their like 60s, 70s. So I don't remember any of them being that profane or that. Just that generation.
No, I just think of him as a turd. I mean, the guy's just not a good person. He's
a piece of shit, for lack of
bad
better
human.
words.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I've met too many people from that generation, that World War II generation, that fought in actual war, that would talk about like that about women or treat women that way or anything. I have a relative. It was one of my dad. My dad's from a big family, so he has cousins that ranged when he was growing up that could be 30 or 40 years older than him. He had cousins that were way older.
Right.
So he had a cousin that fought in World War II that used to come over to the house when we were kids. And when he was away at war, his wife had a kid out of wedlock because he was gone for 4 years.
Yeah.
And there was a huge chunk of time where she never heard, there was no correspondence that was done because the letters just couldn't get from the front lines back to the United States.
Right.
So there was like a 1.5 year gap where she never heard hiding her hair about him, whether he was alive or dead.
Right.
So she had got into a romantic relationship, had a kid, all this kind of stuff. Well, the letters come back in, and he comes back from the United States, and he raises this kid as it's his own for his whole life and never questions it and never upset about it. And I'm just thinking, if like Cotton Hill was in that situation where he comes back from war and there's this illegitimate child here, he would just have been just a terrible human being about it. And I'm not saying that entire generation was good. Just my experience with people from that generation in Texas, I don't think of Cotton as a Texan, No.
Hank right in the middle of these people to sort of show that that's not exactly who we are anymore.
Do you think then it has helped that many may tend to think of Hank Hill in particular, if not other characters on the show, as stereotypical Texans, that those outside the Lone Star State maybe began to think of Texas a little bit differently over the last 20 years?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think what King of the Hill did was, it showed that these people lived in Texas, but really they could have been your next door neighbors anywhere. I mean, they could have just as easily sort of been, minus a few storylines about steak and whatnot, might have been transplanted to the Midwest really easily.
That's what I think the grand appeal about it is that it did appeal to the Midwest. So there is these Texas nuances and stuff that are like laden through it. But like we said, this could be any Midwestern family.
It appeals to the flyover people.
Yeah.
The flyover
it might not be the bi-coastal elites that like it, what I mean? The coasts, but definitely this is middle America. This show is
100%.
Definitely, the sleepy little town anywhere in the United States kind of thing.
So I think that definitely helps show that we were not necessarily the extremes that people had gotten used to. The refrain that Hank had throughout the series was, "I'm not a redneck." Anytime he was accused of being a redneck, he got very upset.
Yeah,
he was always insisting that he was more complicated than that. And I think King of the Hill showed that Texans had complexities that hadn't exactly been explored before in our.
I like that. I
do
like
too.
how he says that, because there is this like common misconception that we're all, like I said, the cowboy hat thing, and then even further than the cowboy hat thing, they think that everybody wears a cowboy hat and is from Texas is this hick.
Sure.
They expect hey, I'm from. They expect that real slow, and you can even play up on that when you go to places and stuff like that and travel.
Yeah. I don't think of him as a redneck ever.
No, definitely not.
No,
he's a lot more couth, because I've experienced rednecks, and that's not. I don't know. He just never.
Yeah,
that's not what Hank is. Hank is he's a quintessential Texas man. Is what he is.
No, you're right. You're right.
Do you think that perception has changed in the 20 years since?
Absolutely, yes. I think that that perception that we were sort of. A little more reasonable, that the aura of extremism that show took away from us has kind of been undone since then. I think more than anything, perceptions of Texas have been influenced by the George W. Bush era. The politics that have come out of Texas since then have been extremely right-wing. I don't think that people necessarily look at us as Hank Hills anymore.
To my knowledge, there's no release date yet for the reboot that's in production, but assuming it does come along in the next year or so, what do you hope and expect from it?
Well, I would expect it, just knowing how much Hank Hill detested Californians already in the 1990s and was always sort of guarding his area against the influx of gentrification and whatnot. I can only imagine that any reboot of King of the Hill or any a sequel series as it's supposed to be would reflect that, would reflect how much the Texas that Hank Hill knew and wanted to protect has become even more urbanized, even more invaded by CBD stores and things like that taking over his precious lawn. So I'm also hoping for an episode about Elon Musk.
Oh.
Sean O'Neill's a writer at large for Texas Monthly. Sean, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, so honestly, I think he's absolutely right about that. Like that this state has swung super hard right. But
and I don't even really agree with that too much entirely. We're only far right, quote unquote, because of the politics of the state and how it's gerrymandered and how they draw the federal districts. I really, being in all the major cities in Texas every day, at least once a week, Tuesday through Friday, I'm on the road.
Yeah.
I'm in Dallas, Fort Worth. I'm in Austin. I'm in Houston. I'm in San Antonio.
Sure.
And even in some of the outlying communities in those areas that are growing up and building up with this surge into Texas. I don't really feel the conservatism in these major cities. They're thriving right now. Texas is thriving with culture and art and music and stuff like that in all these major cities. To where I don't think that I think the conservatism that everybody is seeing is media based and media driven.
I think it's apples and oranges, right? The politics of our state are super hard right. The people in our state are definitely purple.
We're purple.
They're right in the middle, just like everybody else everywhere else.
Just everybody everywhere else. Everybody likes fiscal conservatism. Everybody likes, being frugal and saving money and things like that in that sense. But everybody wants everybody to be able to thrive however they choose to thrive.
Well, it's like the old saying, everybody's a liberal till you get your first paycheck. And that's true to a certain degree. But at that point you have changed. I feel like you grow up a little bit and realize, oh shit, it takes money to do all these things.
Yeah.
It's just like us here, at the network for the first 2 years, we gave everything away just to try to get people on board and get them to make content and things
works.
like that.
Obviously we're here
and now,
in a the only skyscraper the city has, and we're on the second to the top floor. The only reason why we can't get the top floor is because that's legacy.
Lawyers.
Yeah, it's legacy lawyers up there with millions. So.
Yeah, and so, we knew at a certain point we were going to have to make that hard right turn where, and I don't mean right, but you know what I'm saying, that hard turn and say, okay, things have to be paid for it now at some point. We got to pay for these things.
You got to find out how to
and
to
we've
create a
run
revenue.
into some things where people are like, oh, I didn't know I'd have to pay for it. Well, how do you think we keep the lights on? That just it has to happen at a certain point.
Yeah, at a certain point for sure.
I don't ever, and I am a true Texan, but I don't ever think hard right, hard left.
I don't really
mine
think
is
in
right
those
down the
terms
middle
either.
all the time. I hate politics. I can't stand it. I don't think they have our best interest at heart. And I think that's a very Texas way of thinking.
And that's one of the things that kind of irks me about the fan base for King of the Hill is there's an element that wants to push this, total conservatism on Hank and the show when the show is
they don't see the nuances
about social liberalism.
They don't see the nuances.
That's what it is. The whole show is like this juxtaposition of Texas conservatism with social liberalism, and it combines the two because that's what Texas is. It's combined.
Every episode, Hank learns something.
Yeah,
about how hard he is right, but maybe he shouldn't be because of this other thing. Just
like the episodes,
not
every
hard to see
show,
if you're
the
open-minded.
writers always create this appeal to his humanity.
Yeah,
there's always some type of appeal to his conservatism, and it's all based in humanity and like how he feels about human beings and stuff like that. And every episode where there is this type of, it's like the episode with Snoop Dogg where he's the pimp, and it's like the episode. There's all this element of Hank just wanting to do right by people and do right for people, regardless of who they are. He helped this hooker out. He helped a transsexual out.
Yeah.
He does all these things where he's helping all these people, where people that think of conservatism and they think, well, that's not really aligned with what conservatism is. It's like it's like one of the observations I've made in life here in Texas. It might be the meanest, most hateful, older white guy driving in his pickup truck, but he sees a guy, he might be Hispanic, he might be black, he sees him on the side of the road with a flat tire. It doesn't matter what his racial prejudices are. It doesn't matter what his biases are. Texas culture dictates that he's going to pull over and help that guy, regardless of what his direct bias is to him, because that's just what Texans do. We help people.
No matter what I'm doing, my first inclination is to pull over and help somebody if I can.
And I don't have any racial biases. I help anybody for any reason whatsoever. But it's just
we're all people. We're all trying to get through the day. That's really it. We get up in the morning and we try to make it to night. That's all there is to it. You know. No, I always think of King of the Hill as very purple. And unfortunately, Hank was raised by a person who is not purple.
And then again, he is. And I don't think his dad is even super hard right. What super hard right guy that I know as far as Texas conservatism goes is going to be hanging out at a strip club or being misogynistic to women and stuff like that. That doesn't align with conservative values, how he treats women and stuff like that, and how he doesn't even care about going to church. So I don't even see him as a strict conservative.
Yeah, maybe not.
Conservative.
But I really enjoyed them talking about this, and I'm thankful that they asked these questions because this is how you feel about the show all the time.
Absolutely.
People always are like, "Oh yeah, that Texas show." It's not really a Texas show, man. It just takes place in Texas. That's all there is to it.
And that's why the fan base that you and I have discovered doing this King of the Hill thing, we have discovered how diverse.
Oh yeah.
The diversity in the King of the Hill fan base actually kind of surprised me.
Did it?
At how extremely diverse it is.
Yeah.
And if you think that King of the Hill is just a Texas show, then just go onto our social media and see all walks of life that interact with our show. People that you would argue wouldn't be King of the Hill fans based on their whatever it may be, their religion, their sexuality, their gender. You wouldn't think that they would be fans of King of the Hill based on those biases. If that's the thought. If you want to think in that line of thought. And it's cool to see that. I'm glad that our fan base is so wide and it allows for a wide variety of perspectives on the show and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just comedy, man. It all comes down to it's comedy, and
comedy.
And every once in a while, you learn a little something, or at least the characters do.
Yeah. No, well, I mean, if you were watching the show at all, there's definitely tales of morality that could be applied to your daily lives. I feel like if you're looking that deep into a show,
Yeah, Absolutely. All right. Well, I think we tore that one a new one.
Yeah.
Are we? And if you guys have anything to input on that, again, it's HoustonPublicMedia.org, Houston Matters, and the title of the article is "Are We Still Living in the Texas Depicted in King of the Hill?" Give that a listen, and if you have any reflections, please send them to us. You want to tell them how they can find us?
Yeah, you can find us on bwaaaakoth.com, or you could go to roguemedianetwork.com/bwaaaakoth. We'd appreciate it if you went to patreon.com/bwaakoth and clicked on the supporter role and support us in this. We're engineering and coming up with content and things like that to post to it. As soon as we get everything figured out, we'll start uploading content more for you guys for that. Also, don't forget to go to Rogue Media Network and check out some of the great shows they have over there. I'm a personal fan of the horror podcast Boobays. They go through movies and stuff like that, horror movies. And with Halloween coming up, I'm sure they're running a special this month on their podcast, doing some kind of special activities or something, whatever it may be for movies.
I'm going to be on later today, one of their episodes. They're doing Evil Dead 2, which is one of my all-time favorite movies.
Oh, yeah,
so,
Ash.
Yeah.
We actually have the Evil Dead painting that your son, correct? Your son painted it?
My son did if you ever see it on the video, my son did that painting. It's
look out for it next Monday. We'll make sure
it's a crossover between Ash and King of the Hill. So, all right. Well, we want to thank you guys again for joining us. Have a great Friday, and we'll see you again on Monday.
We've been talking.
Indeed. This has been a Rogue Media Network production.